want to start by introducing Assemblymember Salas, and I think many of you know him because he's well known for being out in the community and not just kind of like hiding out in hiding in Sacramento. So that's really important. And I wanted to say that he represents, of course, many cities: Bakersfield, Wasco, Delano, Button Willow, too many different ones to name. So it's great to see all them showing up in the chat box. And he's recently shown his commitment to nonprofits in the communities we serve in two really important ways. One, he's a member of the Assembly Committee on the Nonprofit Sector, which is a standing committee in the Assembly that works on issues related to nonprofits. And so we have been so honored to work with that committee and with Rudy Salas in particular. And secondly, there's a letter that many of you signed with more than 1,200 nonprofits signing, asking for some very specific things that the state needs to do to help nonprofits, such as, for example, contract relief in terms of paying nonprofits that have contracts with the state 1/12 of their contract, even if they can't meet their particular deliverables, because, for example, they just can't do home visits right now for adoption certification and things like that. So, and a parallel letter by Assembly members was also signed by Rudy Salas, and so he's really shown his commitment to all of us in that way. And actually just by being here, right? To listen to what everybody has to say and to answer all the questions that we can possibly answer in this short amount of time. So thank you very much again, and let me turn it over to you, Assemblyman.
All right, thank you, Jan. I appreciate that, and thank you for that introduction. Obviously, I'd like to thank you guys for helping host this, put this on. Obviously, my friend, Congressman TJ Cox, and then we have a couple of other people on the panel as well. Perez-Dowling with the United Way, Jeremy Tobias, CEO of Community Action Partnership of Kern, obviously Lucy and yourself with CalNonprofits. But, I know today we were talking about, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to host this? What are people going to ask? Right? And we thought this was just a good forum for a lot of not only constituents, but a lot of our nonprofits trying to figure out what's going on right now, what's going on in the state. Ever since the middle of March when we started dealing with coronavirus and COVID, we've had a lot of questions. One is, are the nonprofits still going to be operating because they can't go do those site visits that you had talked about, for instance? Is the state going to be there to help? And, one of the things that we did up in the state capitol is we allocated over $500 million actually to the governor right away to start dealing with the coronavirus and with COVID, and we authorized him up to $1 billion. And we know right now for our nonprofits, now is the time when people are leaning on your services. In fact, I think I just read a LA Times article that was talking about how people are utilizing the nonprofits even more. And you can see that especially in the food banks. And I know we have Jeremy and Madi on the line who have been running these food banks. And we've seen, I've been at least a dozen of them so far. And I could tell you every time I go to each food bank, everyone there says, usually we have 100, 200, or whatever the number is. Now multiply that by 2 or 3 because that's what we're seeing now. And that's understandable given what we're even seeing in our office dealing with the EDD cases and how many number of folks have either had their hours cut or their employment completely cut off. And so I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Obviously in the state capitol, we're trying to do what we can first with that initial allocation to help out. But right now we're in the middle of discussing the June 15th budget. And in that budget, we're talking about allocating another $30 million to actually help with nonprofits and specifically to the food banks, just because we've seen that up and down the entire state. So, we're here to help and we're trying to do the best that we can. Some of the other things we're trying to work on is like the CalFresh applications. How do we streamline that? How do we make that better? I know we got a lot of concern, especially from our folks in the elderly community, our seniors, that were saying, hey, I'm kind of scared to go to the grocery store. Can we do something where I can order my groceries online? So obviously we've worked with the governor and the administration to try to streamline those applications, but also for them to be able to get groceries, put food on the table without putting themselves necessarily at risk. And so we've been working through a lot of those issues, and I know we've done a lot with those. The other thing too, I remember talking to some of the food banks and the distributors and the farmers. and they were talking about how they weren't able to get all their stuff to market because either the workforce was impacted or the grocery stores weren't asking for it because they weren't seeing the volume come in. And so what we try to do is design a state program, and I think the feds, and maybe Congressman Cox could talk about this, is how the feds kicked in, I think, $3.6 million to actually help get some of that food. Instead of it spoiling out in the fields or in a warehouse somewhere, we're getting that out to our nonprofit organizations and to a lot of the food banks as well. So there's a lot of support going in for them as well. And so I'm just happy to be here and to participate and to just see what more can we do. You know, the best thing about government is it's listening to people and finding out what the needs are. And you guys are front and center, you're frontline, hearing directly from people as well with all the work that you're doing. And so I appreciate it. You know, my hat's off to what you guys do, every single one of you, because we know you are the ones that are really having and making that impact in people's lives. And so thanks. And I'm here to help. All right. I think, Jan, you're muted.
And you're on mute.
Thanks for saying you're here to help. We're here to get you to help.
All right.
So thanks very much. And just one kind of comment, you know, on one hand, in the nonprofit community, we have people just bursting, like you mentioned, right? The Meals on Wheels and the shelters. And on the other hand, right, every theater, every museum is completely closed. And so nonprofits are at every point along that spectrum. So we're really seeing really different things. Before Congressman starts to talk, I just want to remind people to please put your questions and your comments into the chat box or into the Q&A box so that our panelists can see the questions, and they'll also be trying to answer them online as well as trying to answer them live. And even if we don't get to all the questions, which we probably won't because we have so many people on this call, about 80 people so far, that we know that both of them have their staff participating and leading the questions, and those will definitely be informing the work that they do going forward. So again, encourage you to put your comments into the chat box, into the Q&A box. So Congressman Cox, I think it's up to you now to tell us what is the federal government doing in terms of advocacy and relief for the nonprofit community. Uh-oh, you're muted.
Yeah, Jan? Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Congressman.
Okay, hey, no, thanks so much. Hey, Jeremy, great to see you here today. And thank you so much, Assemblymember Salas, for inviting me. And once again, apologize for a little bit of the technical difficulties that we're having here. But, I just had a, on the federal level, we know that, this is an unprecedented economic emergency, healthcare crisis. And we've been doing, trying to make sure that people are affected, or in fact not affected, to the greatest extent as possible. And we've certainly heard nonprofits are struggling to make ends meet right now. And as you may know, is that we've passed.
Congressman, we lost your audio.
Yeah, I just got to, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah,
Yeah,
so something happened. I just saw that the host had muted me. And so we had passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We passed CARES, CARES 1.5, and recently we just passed the HEROES Act. And we want to make sure that nonprofits are certainly taken care of. They are the organizations that where the rubber hits the road. We've been out to weekly food distributions. We've seen how many people, the cars that are a couple miles long, looking for this assistance. And the thing that's really struck me when we're on these distributions is how many of those vehicles, and I'd say it's probably 90%, have got either children or car seats in their back seats. All right. So this is just not individuals, that are being harmed. It's the entire families. There's a lot of provisions that were meant to bolster the steps that we've taken so far in the HEROES Act, and now that needs to be taken up by the Senate, and we're pushing the Senate each and every day to be able to make those types of provisions. And so certainly, the things that are important to the nonprofits, I'd love to hear. And I applaud you guys for all the great work that you're doing. And my office is open each and every day via remotely, either there in Bakersfield or in Salas or in Washington, D.C. too. So once again, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. And we are there being just as effective and as responsive as we can.
Shall I jump in? This is Lucy Salcido Carter. Hi, Congressman.
Hi.
I'm the policy director with CalNonprofits. Thank you so much. I'm going to say a couple of words just about how nonprofits are faring with some of the federal
Sure.
relief programs that you mentioned. You mentioned CARES Act 1. And one of the things that was wonderful about that was the Paycheck Protection Program. But it was a struggle for nonprofits to access that program in that first round. As I'm sure you know, and a lot of the nonprofits on this webinar know, a lot of the lending institutions were working with their bigger clients and not really working with nonprofits, and nonprofits didn't necessarily have the relationships with that first batch of lending institutions that the larger organizations did. So in that first round, nonprofits didn't fare as well. But then in the second round, what you called, I think, CARES Act 1.5, with the additional funding and then some designated funding for smaller lending institutions like community banks and credit unions, more nonprofits were able to access the PPP. So that was really good. We don't know how many nonprofits have been able to access the program. And one of the things we've been pushing for is better data. We've seen those SBA reports, and they say how much money has gone into that amazing loan program, but we don't know how much of that money has gone to nonprofits in particular. So that would be something that would be great to know, to be able to push for even better policies for nonprofits.
Yeah, and if I could weigh in on that,
Please.
is that when the whole PPP came out, it came out exactly the way I thought it would, because I was speaking with banks and actually the smaller lenders and so on. And a good friend of mine, he's a bank president. He said, listen, would I rather do one $10 million loan or $100,000 loans, right? I'll make the same fee. And by the way, if I do 100 loans, the smaller loans, I've got to service all those loans, right? I've got to do all the compliance. So I've made 100 times amount of work, right, than doing one loan. And so you saw how that money was quickly vacuumed up by all the larger institutions and well-connected. And you might have heard, that there was a lot of clamoring kind of on the other side, is that the Democrats didn't want to replenish the program after all the funds had been extinguished. Darn right we didn't want to, because it wasn't going to the people we wanted it to. And I wasn't going to just re-up it and let it be quickly. And so actually we let a letter, I let a letter to the Treasury Department, to leadership, that said, hey, listen, we want money that are going to be set aside for these for the community banks, the smaller lenders, the community development financial institutions, right? And with this focus on lending to the small businesses and for nonprofit organizations. And so happy that was actually, that we actually got that actually came to pass. And in fact, there's $10 billion right now that's set aside just for these community development financial institutions. And so very happy that your advocacy really made a difference there. And that's what's just so important. And Rudy and all the other elected officials will tell you, is that your advocacy every day makes a difference. We hear what you're saying and we translate that into action.
Well, thank you so much for your leadership as well on that issue. And now we're hearing from nonprofits who are receiving the PPP loan and now are focused on how to make sure that they can get the forgiveness part of that loan, that they'll be able to turn that loan into a grant. And I understand that there's a bill that's passed in the House and I believe the Senate, the PPP flexibility act that would give organizations that have PPP loans more time to for the forgiveness period of their loan. So that's
Yeah.
really a great policy.
Yeah, very, very much so. Is that that was passed a couple weeks ago. I think it was just, in fact, yesterday, passed by the Senate. And in the particulars, I think it extends the length of time that those monies need to be extended. Certainly expands the payback time from 1 year to 4 years, if in fact they aren't completely forgiven. But for the most part, if you're talking about nonprofits who are going to use the most of those funds for salaries, it's going to be forgiven. That was the congressional intent there. So you know, the forgiveness part of it is something that I really wouldn't worry too much about. I mean, for all nonprofits I know, they're qualified.
Great, thank you. You also mentioned the HEROES Act, and I know one of the things that nonprofits are really thinking about and worried about is whether there'll be additional federal support to the states and local governments, because we know that California is facing state budget cuts, and we know that the federal funding can make a big difference. So we hope that there's some movement with the HEROES Act. I know that it's a more of a partisan bill, and that there's some struggles on the Senate side, but we're hopeful that there'll be federal support for state and local governments coming through.
Well, once again, yeah, absolutely, you're exactly right about that. That there was nearly $1 trillion that was set aside for state and local governments, because the fact is that there's going to be revenue shortfalls, and that revenue can only come from one place, from people's taxes. But certainly they're not there if they're not working and their businesses aren't making profits, if they're not being able to pay property taxes and so on. Or it can come from the federal government, which is really coming from ourselves. We pay taxes, and so what a better investment to, you know, it's a decision whether or not we should actually fund ourselves to be able to provide these vital services. And I think the answer is yes. The Senate, you know, they've been a little reluctant or truculent about that position, but the more advocacy that they hear from their elected officials, from mayors and, you know, and from mayors and county supervisors and so on, and state legislators, that's going to be very, very effective. And naturally, that is a bipartisan type of thing. So the more advocacy there, the better.
Great, thank you.
So Assemblymember, I think it's back to you now to introduce some local folks.
You're muted, Assemblymember.
That's all we hear nowadays.
I muted it so we didn't get that background noise that we were hearing on some folks' mic. But yeah, no, I'd love to introduce two amazing people that are actually doing a lot of the groundwork here in Kern County and throughout the valley, and that's Perez-Dowling with United Way and Jeremy Tobias over at CAPK. You know, these individuals have been out there every single day. They're out there working. And so I just wanted to maybe pose a question to both of them, let them introduce themselves, but also just ask them, what are they seeing on the ground? What are the needs? What are the constituents actually talking about? So I think that kind of informs not only the statewide nonprofits organization, but the congressman and myself about what are additional ways we can help. Because obviously we're doing everything we can through statute and through policy in terms of trying to get additional resources and those types of things. But if there's other concerns, we'd love to hear from you, because we know you're on the front lines. And so let me go ahead and just turn it over to, maybe we start with you, Madi, and then we'll move over to Jeremy.
Hi, well, thank you, Madi. Yeah, we started an amazing blessing, private donor meal distribution for individual assistance or support. So what we've seen are at assistance, we're providing up to $1,000 per family or individual, and $50,000 to agencies, which means we got 49 applications. The need is there to really help out with projects that are, you know, benefiting the families and the individuals. The main sector right here is the undocumented and the farm workers who have not received any kind of aid or stimulus check or anything. So as you can see, we are in 14 days of our meal distribution. we're always, doing 2,000 meals a day. We're always running out of food. We're also distributing with agencies like Dolores Huerta Foundation, Unidad Popular. We have so many churches are coming and picking up their meals. But what we see every single day is people asking, can we get help with our rent? Can we get help with our utilities? Agencies were saying, can we just cover our main costs? We are a volunteer-based organization. How do we pay rent, etc.? So we don't have enough funding to help all of them. Wish we had tripled, try to help out as many people. We have another 3 more weeks of this project, the distribution, and next week with the individual assistance. We are doing a phase 2 of the funding for individuals coming after July. So we're hoping that we get to, what I've seen also from the PPE, so we're ordering masks and gloves. Outlining areas. We are also going there working either day or night. So a lot of stations to make sure that those meals got distributed to the right hands, and also to get more information out there and see what they need. And again, thank you for the opportunity to word out is that then are being marginalized, like the undocumented, obviously the that are most in need, and we wish we could add more money to help them out.
Got it. No, thank you for that, and thank you for that work, especially for the populations you're talking about as well. I know the governor made a statement, I think it was like a week and a half ago, to actually assist a lot of those folks as well. And that was a partnership between a lot of actually nonprofits and trying to combine, public-private money to actually go out and actually help all Californians, right, regardless. And so appreciate that. Then I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to go, and then maybe we'll talk about some of the other stuff as well.
Sure. Thanks, Rudy. I want to thank CalNonprofits for hosting the event, and I'm honored to be included with this distinguished panel. CAPK is the official poverty fighting network here in Kern County agency. We assist low-income individuals and empowering them to move out of poverty and becoming self-sufficient. We operate about 17 distinct programs here in Kern County, everything from Head Start to WIC and energy assistance, and VITA, and things like that. When the pandemic hit, I think our first course of action is the executives. We decided to first of all, CAPK was designated as an essential service provider, but we wanted to focus on which programs are truly essential, which ones can we not even skip a day operating. Where do we not have the luxury to wait a week or two to figure out what we want to do? And a few of them that we deemed essential that the clients really relied on and needed was the food bank, our 211 call center to get information out about the pandemic and resources in the community, our WIC program providing supplemental nutrition, and our migrant alternative payment childcare program we felt were truly essential. So we focused on those 4 to begin with, and we said, okay, we can't, these can't stop. We cannot let these programs pause for any real amount of time. Of those 4, I think the one that really demonstrates, the realities on the streets, probably, as Rudy mentioned and TJ's mentioned, is the food banks. I mean, the food banks, our food bank, the reality at our food bank is we saw a surge which was unimaginable. We already live in a food insecure region. Kern County in the Central Valley has a very high food insecurity rate. And then you throw in the pandemic and the immediate unemployment and economic disaster, and we saw a surge. We surged from we were averaging about 1.6 million pounds a month in distributions, and we added right out of the gate in the first couple of weeks, that went up by 1 million pounds a month. And that surge was immediate. So that was the other unusual thing about it, was just the quickness that this all happened. And some of the realities of it also is we immediately, almost on day 1, lost our volunteer resources for various reasons. A lot of the volunteers had been assigned by other agencies, and those agencies pulled those volunteers back to address other issues. Obviously, a lot of the volunteers were uncomfortable coming in and were sheltering at home. So we were immediately faced with the reality of not having enough feet on the ground and hands in the food bank because we rely so heavily on our volunteer workforce. We also saw another thing we have to remember is we saw an immediate decrease from a lot of our grocers that had been donating, because as we all know, they were slammed as well, and they were just trying to keep food on the shelves and keep their employees working through this thing. So we saw a lot of our normal distribution sources dry up, and so this was a crisis from many directions. But I do want to say something, and I think if you stand back and look, the response from all the way from top to bottom, from the federal government all the way down to individuals in the community, has really been pretty dynamic and inspiring. From our vantage point, the federal government stepped up quickly with the CARES funding. The state government's been unbelievable. The governor and the electeds at the state level, pushing through USDA and emergency food assistance to our food bank. Disaster boxes, they had to, within days, they had the National Guard packing food boxes, emergency food boxes, and sending them to our food bank. The county, our local county, some of the CARES money that came down to them, they were in negotiations with them to put together a senior food program specifically for seniors. And some of the speakers had mentioned this earlier. They're sheltering in their homes, and it would be a crisis for them to have to leave their homes. We want to mitigate that. So we're going to do food porch delivery to seniors, and we're setting that up with the county through some of their CARES funding. Also, our local foundations and our local businesses have stepped up. Our local farmers, someone mentioned that earlier, have stepped up. And just the individuals in the community. I've been signing thank you letters almost on a daily basis, hundreds of them, and thanking people from donations everywhere from $10 up to thousands of dollars. And I think the bow on top of all of that, from top to bottom, is the strong sense of community collaboration and goodwill. People want to help, and it's from the electeds to the other nonprofits to the government agencies to the individuals in the community. Everybody wants to participate, wants to know what they can do, and they want to collaborate. I urge everyone to take advantage of this sense of urgency in the community and the strength of this feeling. One example I'll use is I got a call a few weeks ago from Assemblymember Salas's office. They were talking about doing a water distribution in one of the smaller communities in our county, Lost Hills, and so we started looking at, well, could we do a food distribution event at the same time? And it just all started coming together, where we turned it into quite a big event, which is just a small flavor of what the nonprofits are on the ground and seeing what's happening with our help, that the electeds and the private businesses and the government sector can put together. So I want to thank everyone from top to bottom, all the other nonprofits, the federal, the state, the local government, the individuals in the community. I think, for the most part, everybody's doing a great job, and I'm very proud of the way the community has stepped up and mitigated the impacts of the COVID.
Jeremy, it's great how you showed not only how much the crisis has shown the importance of nonprofits, but also the importance of strong government action. Nonprofits couldn't be doing what we're doing without government support, and government couldn't be doing what they're doing without nonprofits. So I really appreciate that. So we have lots of questions, and some of them were submitted in advance and some of them are coming in, as you can see. So I'm just going to kind of pose them, and whoever seems like the right person should respond to them. So there are a number of questions that are kind of boiled down to one, and that is, if you don't get government funding already in your nonprofit, especially if you're a smaller nonprofit or one in a rural area, what kinds of government assistance is there available to you? Okay, don't everybody talk at once, telling about I know this is a tough question.
Yeah, so I could take a stab at it. I mean, I know we've been working with a lot of our nonprofits and trying to figure out, I know at the state level, how we tell people we deal with the big buckets first, and then we kind of hope that comes all the way down. So the money that we've been allocating, for instance, for the food banks, we rely not only directly with food banks, but we work through the counties, right? And so what I've been telling a lot of our smaller nonprofits is to make sure that you're applying for that grant money that we're making available from the state and the federal government. through your locals. So whether that's through the city or really through the counties is a big conduit of where those resources are coming from. And so I would encourage everybody to do that. But I'd like to maybe even ask a question kind of related to this, and maybe Jeremy and Madi, you guys could talk about this. But how is that funding actually coming through for you guys as nonprofits? And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get that to where it needs to be? Because I feel like in the Capitol, we're always fighting, the good fight, trying to get the resources. But and I know you guys are doing great work out there, but I just want to see, how are you accessing that? How are you doing that? Is that on a grant basis? Is that to the department? So maybe you could help explain that, and maybe that'll help the smaller folks that are on the call try to figure out how they access some of this, or even just tie into the good work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, I can jump in. Thanks, Rudy. Well, first of all, the PPP, CAPK wasn't eligible for that. We have more than 500 employees, so we could not participate. Most of our federal and state assistance has been through departments we currently already do work with.
Right.
So some of those contracts were expanded, and it has come down, I'd say, very quickly. I was impressed. A lot of times we all joke about how slow government moves, but when there's a crisis, good government tends to work pretty quickly. And I think in this case, I've seen that. For the agencies that are not eligible for government funding, we have found at our agency, because we also deal with foundations, our local foundations have really went out of their way to step up. We've had a lot of private businesses and local foundational groups reaching out to us, and we're reaching out to them and offered us funding. I would suggest very strongly that you reach out to your local businesses and foundations for assistance. They all want to help right now. They really do. And we've had a lot of success with our local philanthropy and foundations to kind of fill in the gaps between the government funding that we get and those contracts. And that's been very helpful for us.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy.
And, the one thing I'd say is that a lot of the funding that we have provided has gone down to the community development financial institutions, the CDFIs, that actually can provide other sources of funding, very flexible credit. They meet unmet credit needs. And so if you're reaching out to those types of organizations, that's one source of assistance. But then on a larger scale is that through CARES Act funding, a lot of the municipalities got quite a bit of money that they're supposed to be using on COVID-related activities. And so if there's an opportunity that can be tied into some type of COVID response that an organization could volunteer or actually contract with the county or with the city too, that might be something that an organization can look at to provide kind of an alternate source of revenue.
Congressman, or for anybody in a given city, what's the right department to be approaching around that?
It would typically be in a city. I think certainly Fresno was the only one that got a substantial amount of money in the Central Valley here. They got $90 million. I think the county got $80 million to be used, and so it would be that your county supervisors or your city council members or your mayors.
That's good.
Also, Jan, here in Kern, the local government CARES funding went through the county of Kern. I think they received 157 million around there, and they distributed that. They distributed some of it to the local cities, and they set up their own PPP program on top of the federal one to layer on top of that. So they're running their own PPP program. So any nonprofits in the Kern area, I would definitely reach out to the county of Kern. I think it's on their website. You can go to the CAO's office and apply for that funding. And then that's the funding also. Then they carved out a small amount for food insecurity, which we're negotiating with them on that food bank, that senior shelter in place, doorstep food distribution we're working with them on.
And also, if you're having trouble finding the right person at the county, you can always call your own personal member of the Board of Supervisors of the county. They're always a good resource for direct connecting you to the right office in the county. So we have a number of questions kind of asking for advice. We have some organizations like Lions Club, for example, and some others that have had to cancel fundraisers because of COVID. And what advice do people have for those kinds of organizations?
You know what I've seen, this is Assemblymember Salas. I've seen, I know a number of people have canceled their events or have had to postpone them because of the coronavirus. So I've seen some innovative things from some groups so far where they're doing like online auctions with whatever prices they were going to have at their event. I thought that was a good way to still kind of generate some revenue and get some interest. I've seen other nonprofits host like a gala event, but through online. Right? And they'll have either somebody instructing or giving a dance lesson or, it's just, people are just being creative. And I would say, just look at some creative ways at what other people are doing. And, if it works, then take it and use it. I'm sure we're in a world and in a bubble here where we don't mind sharing ideas and things that work for one organization, possibly work for another, or just kind of do your own little twist on it. I think I saw somewhere around the state, the Boys and Girls Club used a lot of the children, and they were telling them like, hey, you know what, you could actually watch the child make a piece of artwork for you, and then they donate to do that. And so it's kind of like you see the whole process too. So, I think there's a lot of creative ways, and there's probably a lot of people on this call that have some creative ways where they've come out to kind of deal and meet that challenge. And so those are the things that I've seen.
I'm the one that canceled our nonprofit conference, a few other events with workplace campaign. We've also had but we started, it's a fund. It's called helpkern.org. And with the meal distribution, we started targeting, $4 or $20 can feed 5 families or 5 members of a family, $100, 20. And so far we've gotten over $50,000 in donations. So either agencies who have able to spend probably the sponsorships decided to go and donate to us, individuals from $10, like Jeremy was saying, to $10 to all the way to $10,000 to $50,000 have come through that fund, only because it's targeted to a specific cause. I don't think you can just say, okay, we didn't have a chance to fundraise or create an event, so give us the money. No, you have to be targeting the cause right now with the crisis that is happening, and what is that money going to be utilized for. So now that we know it's for meals, that we're going to be buying people, all that's when people who actually want to donate, because they know of the situation that is happening. So I think that you, like Rudy said, you have to be really creative, but also be aware of the circumstances and how the situation can be utilized to benefit not only your company or your agency, but the community itself.
So, we at CalNonprofits know that Kern County and some of the other Central Valley counties just don't receive their fair share of government funding, either on the federal side or on the state side. And what can local nonprofits be doing to support you, Assemblyman Salas and Congressman Cox, to bringing more money into our counties?
For the state, I would say it's the advocacy up in the state capitol, especially when we're in times of doing the state budget like now, and just talking about the good work that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about the budget, it's how do we get the most bang for the buck, and how are we helping Californians? It doesn't matter if you're in Kern County or if you're, all the way down in Imperial County. What we're trying to do, and really actually leaning on the governor as well. I'm telling the governor, hey, we need to take care of all Californians. I always pitch to him, I'm like, look, we live in the Valley, and there's you talk about how important you think the Valley is. One way you can help is actually helping our nonprofits and helping things to shore people up. So whether that means helping them get a job or the services to figure out how to do an interview, those are the skills, right, to do that. And a lot of times our nonprofits are the ones that step up to the plate to help fill those gaps that need to be done. And so I would say it's sharing those stories a lot more with either the governor's office or even elected officials up and down the entire state. So then when we're talking about trying to get the most bang for the buck or trying to help out those communities that have double-digit unemployment, that are in those census tracts as being disadvantaged, that we can go ahead and give them that opportunity for some equity. And so those are the recommendations I would have.
Right. Thanks. Congressman, do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to go back to, the other thing that I want to make sure that nonprofits know about is the employee retention credit to businesses, nonprofits included, that have been affected by that. So that goes a long ways towards, helping provide a little bit more relief in actually cash to those organizations that have been affected by that. And with what Rudy was saying, with regard to fundraising, nowadays with the Zoom calls, it's very, very easy to do a virtual online type fundraiser. And if you have the donors that aren't able to attend the annual events that a lot of the organizations have had planned previously, you can simply do it very easily online. And it's very, I'd say, we've had great success getting people to headline these types of events. Like you say, the other night we had Jason Alexander headlining an event because he could just call in from his own home, right? And say some words and, hey, please contribute. And so a lot of those supporters are certainly still out there as well. And how do we make sure that we get our fair share? It really is no secret. It's by that continued advocacy, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. One nice thing about the governor is that more so than maybe some of our governors in the past, he's paying a lot of attention to the Central Valley. Just last November, he was in Fresno at the California Economic Summit, and literally stated that growth means inclusion, and inclusion means ensuring that the Central Valley gets the resources from state leaders necessary to strengthen economic opportunity right here. And so we're continually reminding him of that commitment. And, the things that are successful, it's great when you bring light to that, and how electeds like Rudy and myself and whomever else are really lending a hand to that. Those things go a long ways. And so.
Yeah, I thought there was a clever one. I know the Dolores Huerta Foundation, I think, is on the call.
Yeah.
What they did with Dolores's birthday fundraiser, right? Having, Bill Clinton and Hillary on the call, to celebrities, to musicians. I thought that was a creative way. So let's try to figure out what your connections are to tie those things in. If you have those assets, how do you utilize them? So I think that's probably a good way. I think that was a good example, and maybe others on the call that are thinking like, okay, who can I utilize for these types of events? That I think that would be good.
Thanks. Speaking of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we have a couple of questions from them that other people have echoed as well. So one of them is, related to masks and other kinds of personal protective equipment, PPE. So first of all, how can nonprofits get access to them at affordable rates so they can distribute them to the families and the workers that they work with? And they're also concerned about some employers not enforcing mask rules related in their workplaces. And so what can those two questions, access to personal protective equipment and enforcement of the rules in workplaces?
Okay, I'll start. For PPE, a lot of the best place to start, I always tell people, is Department of Public Health at the county. Because I know I've been talking to the state Department of Public Health, and they've been distributing, I know they've distributed over 1 million PPE already in the state. It's probably a couple million at this point in terms of masks, gloves, face shields, that type of thing. So I would say definitely go through the Department of Public Health. That's one way. The other way too is businesses have actually been giving out. I know I had a business contact me and say, hey, we want to help we're going to get some PPE. It won't be in for, and this was at the beginning, it won't be in for like 3 or 4 weeks, but we want to be able to distribute it. So sometimes just reaching out even to your elected, sometimes there's groups and organizations that ask us, and we're more than happy to help. I know I was with the unions as well. I was with United Domestic Workers who were distributing PPE to their workers, and they were able to secure things like that. So it's really, I think, just asking around. But if you have nowhere to think where you can ask, I would definitely start with the County Department of Public Health and start there and try to figure out where we go from there. And you know, we'll find a way. All right, that's one thing about Californians is we find a way to make it work somehow. And so I've seen some people that are like, okay, hey, my PPE is not going to be in for a while, but I found a couple of people that will actually make us some masks. And so they just bought fabric and made a bunch of masks themselves. Or sometimes there was another group that I had talked to where some of the employees were like, you know what, I'll do this at home. I have a sewing machine. And they made it like a group project with the team. And so they did that and provided that not only for themselves, but also even the frontline workers. So I think there's a number of things that people are doing to try to address the PPE problem or the issue. And those are some of the innovative solutions that I've seen people do. But obviously at the state, we're still pushing, we're still getting more. Obviously, you've seen it in the news, you've seen it in the headlines, some of the issues that have happened with acquiring PPE for the governor and some of the others. But, you know, we're pushing through those issues. We're making it work. And the good thing is a lot of companies, too, are stepping up and trying to provide that as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly with what Rudy was saying. And this is what the CARES Act funding was meant to go for. Okay. And so if you start at the county and they said, hey, our cupboards are bare, certainly you could reach out to our office and we can inquire with respect to that. That was why we sent the monies to the counties to be able to, for them to be able to do a number of things, testing, any type of COVID-19 mitigation efforts, which the supply of PPP is exactly what was intended. And so if they're not using the money for those purposes, certainly it's worth a question, why not?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. There's also some questions related to the digital divide. You know, a lot of nonprofits, they don't have the equipment themselves to do some of the things we're talking about. And even more importantly, a lot of the people that they work with don't have access to the internet. You know, we actually know that there are more than 2 million families in California that don't have broadband access at home. So, you know, what kinds of supports are there for both those kinds of communities as well as for the nonprofits that are working on digital divide issues?
Yeah, I can start. I know at the state, we've actually been looking at the California Rural Broadband Initiative, which is trying to get internet to a lot of folks. With coronavirus, what we've seen is with a lot of our schools, we're having a hard time having internet for their kids. And so I know we've worked with a number of providers like Charter and Spectrum and some of the others to actually provide, well, I think in Lost Hills, when I was talking to the superintendent, they're actually making the internet free for a lot of their students. So, you know, they're working, they did a special deal with one of the providers out there. So I know school districts are trying to look at that as well, but at the infrastructure level at the state, I know we're looking at how do we stretch that fiber, that last mile? How do we get it to more places? Are we looking at things like WiMAX to cover things? Is it through cell coverage to get the internet? Because we know that the kids, more than anything, especially now, need access for online resources and for their educational pathway online. And so those are things that we're definitely looking at. And I'm part of a group right now where we're talking about what are some of the recovery efforts for the state as we move forward after all of this. And so what we want to do is try to figure out how do we invest some dollars in that infrastructure? Because we know when we invest $1 in infrastructure, it returns $3, $4, $5 back into the economy, which helps lift all boats. Because once we have more money in the economy, obviously there's a lot of great work that the nonprofits do as well, that we can go and actually help a lot of others. And so those are things that we're looking at. Like I said, we put in some money. That doesn't mean that we're completely done. There's always more to do. There's always more that we can work on. And so we've definitely looked at that. I don't want anybody to think that we haven't tried to figure that piece out. It's just, it's something that we're continuing to chisel at And I think we're making progress and headway, but more than anything, with your guys' voice and you guys voicing like, hey, this is a major concern as well, we need to make sure it needs to be addressed, that we'll continue to address this and continue to push this and say, this is very important to make sure that people have access online. I think more than anything, I was telling somebody, you know, before people used to think of the internet as a luxury. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's more about the internet is becoming more of an essential product that we need in our lives to stay connected, especially for our kids that are doing school online.
Yeah, so true. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add in is that, you know, the provision of broadband to every household in America is a priority of the Congress, and that's really on both sides of the aisle. I think you can see you'll be seeing a very substantive investment in that initiative coming up very shortly. You know, post-COVID emergency, the thing that we all know we need to do is large-scale infrastructure investments, and key to that investment in those initiatives is broadband for everyone. Just, you know, the other day, in fact, I was on the news just basically stating about what we're doing. I'm actually on the Rural Broadband Task Force. And Jim Clyburn, the majority whip, told a great story the other day about, you know, in the 1930s, a preacher was saying, you know, the best thing you can have in your homes and your hearts is Jesus, and the next best thing is electricity. And that's what, you know, broadband is today. It's you know, last year's 100 years ago, the electricity of yesterday. It's absolutely essential to be able to participate in today's economy, I think, society and community. And so that's absolutely key. We see there in Kern where, you know, we've got buses that drive around to be mobile hotspots. You know, that's a small stopgap measure, but obviously, once again, we just need broadband everywhere, and the Congress is dedicated to that. And with regard to the equipment themselves, through the CARES Act, there was a lot of funding provided to schools, educational institutions, to make sure that people had the tablets or laptops or whatever that they could access that, just so they can continue their learning as well.
Thank you. You know, we have clarifications come in through a couple of these different channels. So a question from Letitia was that the Kern County website says that CARES money is only available to small businesses. And we just want to clarify that they don't mean excluding nonprofits. The CARES Act money, when they say small business, they include nonprofits as small business. Is that right?
Yeah, that's completely correct. There, 501c3s are currently allowed. We're working on making sure that the C6s, you know, professional type organizations, chambers of commerce, that type of thing are allowed as well. But if you're a C3 with less than 500 employees, PPP should absolutely be available to you. The other thing that's out there for some of the larger organizations is the recently launched Main Street Lending Program. So if you need particulars about that, you can certainly reach out to our office. Great.
Well, we're just about out of time. I just want to thank everybody for being here. You know, one of the other things we've talked about in our letter and in the letter that Assemblymember Salas was part of signing, you know, is saying that nonprofits and businesses need to be treated equally when it comes to these different government relief acts. So, for example, anything relief for employers has to help nonprofit employers. I mean, after all, nonprofits employ 1 in every 14 California workers. Right now, there's a bill in the California Assembly that we're supporting, for example, that would have both nonprofits and small business have some relief from evictions, not just for residents, which affects so many of our community members, but also for nonprofits, commercial property renters as well. So those are kind of important parts of that. I don't think that Main Street actually includes nonprofits yet. I think that that's something that's still being discussed and needs to be worked on, but I'm not completely sure about that. So Assemblymember, this is, you're the headliner of this event. Do you want to close us out today?
Yeah, let me just close by just saying thank you. Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Lucy, for helping organize and put this together and host this with a bunch of nonprofits. Hopefully we're able to answer a lot of questions, but if we weren't able to get to your questions that you either submitted or in the chat, just know that we're only a phone call away. Just because of the pandemic doesn't mean we're not working. I just tell people our work's a little bit differently, right? Like all of us, we're probably not doing in-person meetings anymore, but we're doing a lot of Zoom calls and we're doing a lot of video calls, and the different platforms. So whether you're using Microsoft Teams or WebEx or Google Meets, you know, we're doing all of those things. And so I know there's someone always answering our phones. And so if we could be helpful, we want to be helpful. We want to try to help connect everybody. We know that you guys are on the front lines helping meet the needs that are out in the community. And so we appreciate everything that you guys are doing. We're trying to do everything that we can at the state capitol to help you guys and assist you as much as you can, because we know at the end of the day, we're just trying to help as many Californians as we can, and you are an integral part of that. I know the congressman is doing what he can at the national level as well to help us do that. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your good work. Keep doing what you're doing. And then, you know, we're trying to help out as much as we can, not just at the state capitol, but I mean, even if you need some bodies, like I think Jeremy had alluded to earlier, where he was saying, you know, they had a cutback of volunteers. And so I took, you know, me and some of my team members went out to go help out at some of the food distributions and things like that. Or I think we took burritos the other day to a bunch of farm workers out in the fields, and we had lunch right before Mother's Day with another group out near Lamont. But, you know, there's things that we're doing, and we'd love to partner with you on a lot of those different events. We're more than happy to be at them. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Now you've made me want to have a burrito. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.